Marketing and Communications Manager at Data Conversion Laboratory, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we get started, I want to let you know we will allow time at the end of the webinar for questions and answers. So please write your questions in the chat area as they come to mind. If we don't have time to answer them all, we will make them available on our website. Next slide, please. For those of you who are not familiar with DCL, we convert and organize content to create electronic documents, populate databases, publish on the web, and basically get it ready for tomorrow's technology. Next slide, please. DCL Services help you refine your document conversion strategy, identify document redundancy, extract metadata, and transform legacy and future documents for real needs, today and in the future. Next slide, please. We serve a very broad client base. Next slide, please. Spanning all industries. Today, we are thrilled to introduce Don Day, Founding Chair of the OASIS DITA Technical Committee. Don is a content engineer with deep experience on innovative authoring solutions and information architectures for structured, semantic content for the web and across the web enterprise. He has led enterprise innovation efforts for more than 20 years, resulting in multiple patents, official recognition for his contribution to re-engineering IBM's information assets, and designation as an OASIS Distinguished Contributor for his efforts convening and leading the OASIS DITA Technical Committee. Don provides consulting on strategy, technology, and best practices for optimizing the value and usefulness of unstructured data. Without further ado, welcome Don.
Thank you very much, Adam. And I appreciate the opportunity to bring folks up to date on a very interesting project that I've been involved with for the last 2 years. You're here because you've heard something about lightweight DITA, and this is my opportunity to bring you up to date. We'll be covering some of the basics behind the project of lightweight DITA. I'll give you some background on the subcommittee that's actually driving this effort, who's in it, and how they're contributing to the design for this proposed standard. And if you're interested in actually giving it a try, I'll have some ideas on practical steps you can take today. And then we'll end with a look ahead at some of the things where this type of technology may be useful in spreading the use of DITA to new areas. DITA's had a long history. We actually began the project in the year 2000. We did the first public initialization or publication of it in March of 2001, and it became a standard in 2005. The principles behind the project are keyed somewhat on the history that has been very successful in the telecom industry and in some others. Particularly right now, it seems to be finding good utility in the pharmaceutical industry and healthcare. But not everyone needs this kind of features that are in DITA, and in particular, many of these new industries that it's been adopted by have come back and said, is there anything we can do to make it less intimidating, fewer tags, fewer processes, less expensive tools for working it with, and so forth. And all of these have become part of a driving force to come up with something that would define what we're calling a profile of DITA. So in standards work, a profile is the use of a particular already enforced standard, but the use of it in such a way that it identifies and supports only a particular community. And in this case, we're talking about a profile of DITA that is more restricted and therefore presumably easier to implement and to use. I've been using the term DITA freely, and I should probably mention that what it stands for is the Darwin Information Typing Architecture. It's an XML vocabulary that defines a way of constructing applications that can represent your kind of information So that's what the Darwin stands for, is simply an assertion to the principle of specialization in DITA that allows an element to be extended into a new type. Information typing, of course, represents the semantic and the modalities of use that you may intend for the information that you're creating. And as an architecture, you can do these different things with it that go beyond what a single purpose document type definition or schema may do. However, with all of this power comes great responsibility, and many groups don't feel that they need the whole capability of the full DITA definition and all of the tools that come with it at that level. So the principle, starting principle, is that it should be easy to use by groups who don't need all these features. The ones that they do have should be familiar to them, and at the same time, the design is forward-looking because it interacts and intercepts some of the DITA 1.3 design points as well. So it's not frozen at this point in time. It's looking very much toward the future. It should be processing compatible with any tools that presently use content at the DITA 1.2 level, and of course any DITA 1.3 tools as well. But if you're already only in DITA 1.2, you haven't moved to DITA 1.3, it should be completely compatible there. In fact, I'm using it with DITA 1.1 compatible tools. I'm not using all the features that would require more extended processing, but it's definitely that flexible. Another intent of the design is to standardize the many lightweight implementations of DITA. So the idea has come up time and time again that, gee, if we could just modify the DTDs or figure out how to remove some of the numbers of elements that are in DITA, we could make our implementations smaller and therefore make them more lightweight. It's a good principle, but different people and different tools have done it in different ways. So this is an opportunity by publishing a profile, and again, a profile being something that broad communities of use can come behind and stand behind in a common way. Then we have the opportunity to encourage more innovation around that profile and create more ease of use in developing new solutions rather than having to develop on an already large and existing processing base that exists for full DITA. And at the same time, it should be flexible enough to allow customization and specialization for communities that have non-intersecting requirements. And a very good example of this is when someone who's working on car parts opens up a DTD and sees software language in some of the elements that are presented there. And that's typically an indication that a DTD's become more cosmopolitan in its purpose, DTD being a document type definition. With specialization, each community can see only the tags that concern their community. And that in itself means there are fewer things in your face that don't apply to the work that you're doing as an author in your documentation work. And then finally, it's intended to provide a lightweight starting point and be very easy to extend. And so, and that's be an alternative, starting off with the DITA full sprung from the head of Zeus, as it were, and then doing some form of subsetting to knock that full level of power back down. So at this point, it's of course natural to remind everyone that because this is a work in progress, it is likely to change. Anything you see and do with it today, but there may be some differences later. I'll talk about those toward the end of the discussion, but just note that because it's a work in progress, anything you do with it carries a small amount of risk. Could be a large amount of risk. It depends what you do with it. We'll talk about that, and you'll at least be able to go into it with your eyes open. And again, this is an opportunity to encourage anyone who's interested to join in the, I call it the ideation. In many ways, we're using this as an opportunity to try to see the world in a different light than we saw it in the year 2000 when DITA was first designed. And so with that fresh opportunity to think things through, we're actually coming up with some new ways to do specialization and some new ideas on how to associate elements and do processing with them. And so we encourage anyone who's interested to follow along with the mailing list and to participate in public forums and discussions that we are having on this, and help us to just put fresh eyes on the problems and the requirements for the coming generation of standards. So a little bit about the OASIS Lightweight DITA Subcommittee. Obviously, this is a sprout off of something larger. The something larger is the OASIS DITA Technical Committee. OASIS is a standards body like ISO or IEEE that creates what are called vertical industry standards for XML. Vertical industry being communities of use that have typically single role purposes. When we proposed putting DITA to an open community from IBM in 2004, we looked at several of these different standards groups and determined that OASIS probably was the best fit because the specialization aspect of DITA fit very neatly into the vertical standards emphasis that's behind OASIS, and it has worked very well in that regard. And so the history of that activity was that we began the subcommittee in 2004, had our first publication of the standard in 2005, and have created several subcommittees to work on subsets of specialization challenges that would be of use to larger communities and help to foster more adoption of DITA in those appropriate places. So with the challenge to try to make DITA easier to use and try to find a lighter weight profile of usage that more vendors and more developers could get behind, the first public proposal was written up and posted by Michael Priestley. The link here is to a blog post that he put in the dita.xml.org community site for DITA support, and lays out the groundwork for the design. The first meeting for the subcommittee was in September of last year, and the committee is presently chaired by Michael Priestley. Michael is IBM's Enterprise Content Technology Strategist. I hope that's the most current title that I was able to find for him. And that means he's busy trying to solve content interchange problems across IBM. So if you are looking for ways to solve cross-company and cross-enterprise content management and content reuse issues, all of this is coming from very much the same concerns. I've put a link here to the OASIS Lightweight DITA Subcommittee site. It has a public page and it has a members-only page. OASIS is a members-supported organization. So if you do want to join the committee, your company may already be a sponsor or a corporate member of OASIS, in which case you can join the committee for free. And there's a low-cost personal membership as well as a tier of memberships based on the size of your organization. So we do encourage participation directly through the site, but if you can't do that, there's still the mailing list and the public activities, and this being one of those where we do make an effort to encourage and let people know what's going on with this activity. So how fast does a standards activity move? You may have heard the term glacial used to describe the standard activity, and if you've been watching and waiting for DITA 1.3 to get out the door, that may have seemed like a stalled glacier. It's been a great deal of effort to try to get that latest version out, but we believe that we'll be on the track to having it approved by the end of the year. And so one of the things that we've done in order to keep that activity on its own pace was to take the lightweight DITA activity out of the critical path for getting 1.3 out the door. And so this lightweight DITA subcommittee is on its own schedule, and it's paced primarily by the need to find new ways of doing things. And so I've said here it's paced by discovery and by testing. We take the new ideas, we try them out, and if it works, we move it forward. And so for those reasons, my projection is that there certainly won't be any completion of the lightweight DITA design process within this year for that very reason that we decoupled it from DITA 1.3 so that it could go its own pace. It might happen next year, in year 2016, but again, that's an awfully long time, and the that's a short time from the standards perspective because there's a built-in approval process that we tack on to the end of the year and back up from that, and we would only have about 7 or 8 months of development before we had to start putting out our various committee drafts in order to be finished by the end of the year. So I'm just giving you a heads up that it may be next year, it could be longer. It will certainly be before the next version of DITA, which we're calling DITA 2.0, comes out. It's nice to be able to see that kind of timeline in a graphical way, and so this little picture, nice picture of the Himalayan hills, gives us a kind of a perspective that DITA 1.3 is on the very near horizon. So we're looking at it over that nearest hilltop. The DITA 2.0 activity could be several years out. Whenever a new version of a standard goes out, it's always good to give the community time to adapt, vendors time to bring their tools up to speed, and let everyone have a couple of years of getting the training, getting used to the standard, and being productive with it before we start bringing something new on. It will take time to roll these ideas from lightweight DITA into DITA 2.0 anyway. And so in this diagram, we're seeing lightweight DITA is out there somewhere. It's in the picture. I can't tell you if it's closer or farther from DITA 2.0. I suspect it's a little closer to the now time frame, but that's where it's pictured relative to the other two standards. So we come back to Michael Priestley's original proposal for lightweight DITA. He posited that there are these key categories of use that the standard could be designed to serve. One being contribution. So that would be the case of the subject matter expert who may be a developer, maybe a customer who's very expert at doing installations and patches on your system. And they'll be creating content that may be brought back into the full DITA system for updating the documentation. And so one channel of use for DITA, lightweight DITA, might be this contribution channel. Another one is the role of collaboration, where a team of expert users needs a methodology, some technique to keep their own house in order. They're not necessarily producing content for everyone else, but they do need a way to enjoy the same benefits that a TechCom group and other centrally based published group may enjoy. And so the SME in this role is maintaining content that could be used by a full DITA system, but it's used by that person's team as well. So the collaboration aspect is very strong there, and a lightweight version of DITA certainly helps that to be implemented because the requirements for tooling and for training are much lower on it, should be much lower. The aspect of parallel adoption would be where you have an authoring team that needs lightweight DITA and can share the CMS and publishing capabilities that the full DITA team in the enterprise has. So this suggests that there's the possibility for linking databases or linking CMSs, and possibility for federated content sharing across the enterprise. not everyone is going to need that, but it's one of those opportunities that can be had when everyone is on the same page in terms of using standards, market standards. New adoption is the role I'm most excited by, and that's the opportunity to bring solutions to authoring teams in the company that have not been using structured authoring before. It gives them a lightweight base to start off on, and then in time as needed, they can evolve to a full use of DITA wherever it makes sense. And my interest is not only in small new fields within a company, but new opportunities in other enterprises beyond companies. And those are some of the anticipation items that we'll be talking about. I believe that lightweight DITA is one of those standards that has the opportunity to surface in many other different areas of information publishing that are primarily web-based today and have no such standard to help drive and coordinate their production and authoring activities. So the subcommittee team did some ideation and came up with several ideas of what they would like to get out of the project. And these are some of them. One is marketing content and any HTML5 mappings that relate to that marketing content. HTML5 is an interesting beast. If you've been following the web activity for the past couple of years, you may have noticed that mention of XHTML has dropped to nearly zero. HTML4 and XHTML are pretty much never mentioned directly in discussions about web publishing architectures. HTML5 has come into the picture in a big way because it has the structural support in it to help drive responsive web renderings of content and to help drive adaptive content, which is where, based on a user's requirements, selected pieces of the content may be served to them. So marketing is very interested in trying to do their job better. If they've been using HTML in the past, they're discovering, along with their production teams, that HTML5 gives them a great deal of power and a great deal of capability that they didn't have before. And so being able to map between lightweight DITA and what they're doing in HTML5 gives us the ability to say, here's a way that you can author your content in a standard way and then export it into HTML5 to drive your business activity. Another role for the standard would be in developing training content, and with that, any mappings into EPUB that would be useful for publishing to remote readers particularly. These mappings have the, I'm going to call them the characteristics of design patterns because they're very consistent typically. A chapter usually has the same kind of a structure. A recipe has a very similar repeating structure. These design patterns apply to training content as well. And so bringing a structured environment like DITA into that content development area helps training content developers and writers to focus on putting the information in a format that becomes easy and reliable for publishing and doesn't cause validation issues. Developer content, if you're a software developer or even an engineering developer, or if you support people in those roles, you've noticed that they've become enamored with a market methodology called Markdown. And so again, DITA, lightweight DITA has that opportunity to help define the relationship between Markdown and HTML5 mappings, and again, back to structured content. So what I mean by mappings is that at the end of the day, if we understand what the relationship are between the mappings for each of these languages, we should be able to come up with ways to interchange content and allow content creators to use the authoring tool of their choice for creating the content and then mapping it directly into the storage system in DITA if that's the best use of the technology. Some of the other ideas that came up are to use DITA and HTML5 for educational publishing in EPUB. These are actually sets of lists from different people, so there's a little repetition here. I wanted to let them say it in their own language. Another one from this group was simple DITA templates would allow educators to create curriculum plans, lessons, and learning modules. Another role would be that the DITA and plaintext dialects, such as Markdown, can be used for things like developer-created API specs. Think of an API as a recipe for the applications that you want to build that speak directly to the capabilities of the system on a remote server. Lightweight DITA templates also would provide for a much simpler set of training, learning, and training content types. There's a lot of focus on learning and training, you'll see here, and for a very good reason. It's a very important role for many companies to be able to get their content out to students and be able to use the same content that was actually developed to document the products that they're learning about. So a lightweight DITA fits into that role very nicely. And a little bit more, this was from yet another person who's had some interesting statements. It'd be nice to be able to, for this to be as easy to use as madcap Flare, popular web authoring tool for knowledge capture from engineers and other subject matter experts. He noticed that it would be useful as a hub for markup interchange and a single focus for interoperability of content, different kinds of content for a company. And primarily, his concern was that it would, not a concern, but expectation was that lightweight DITA would provide a lower perception of DITA complexity by making the editing experience easier, the development experience, and the experience of learning about it. And he summarized it saying, lightweight DITA should be as daunting as a newborn kitten. I rather like that role, and any way that we can keep cats on the internet is fine with me. So I'll take that definition. What can we do for now to get into the lightweight DITA game? I've listed a couple items here, and again, when you get the full slide deck, you'll be able to click on the links and follow the email list and sign up to receive either immediate or daily or weekly roll-ups of discussion from that list. It is standard email, and so you can interact with it through standard email commands and go to the website to see the archive of the data. So you don't even have to receive the email. You could just visit the archives on the web periodically and catch up on what's been going on. The subcommittee maintains a package of materials that we continue to update as new ideas are added to it. And at this point, the link is going off to a I want to say it's a version, but I don't see the link now, so I can't say. But it's a repository that's publicly available. Right now, we're primarily have only document type definitions and sample documents in it. But in time, we expect that as functional plugins for different use cases are developed and added as part of the test suite, that those will be available for others to pick up and use as well. And finally, I encourage you to experiment and contribute to the activity. Pull down the latest package, play with it, and share your ideas, give your reviews, and play with some implementations. It's very exciting to be able to use this, and my own use cases have evolved around creating web-based applications for content where the data is actually displayed dynamically on the fly rather than being pre-built into a static form of HTML. I find this very exciting, and I think it has the possibility for creating structured content that is easily updated and can be pressed into the role of adaptive and responsive content much more easily. And so I imagine you're wondering, well, what does lightweight DITA look like? We'll look at it from two viewpoints. We'll look at a sample of the markup itself, and then I'll show you some sites that, in my mind, are examples of the kinds of things that lightweight DITA would be excellent for. And we'll talk about those use cases. So here's what a lightweight topic looks like. It looks like a standard DITA topic. The only difference in the doc type, which is the line at the very top, the blue line, is the insertion of the character string LW, which stands for lightweight. That's the only part of that doc type definition that differentiates this topic from a standard DITA topic. If you actually took that LW out of the line, it would process just like a standard DITA 1.3 or a DITA 1.2 topic, whatever your current DITA processing system is based on. But with the LW in there, it informs any editors and any processing tools that the tag set is more restricted. And that's the power of being able to define your scope of complexity down to a more manageable level. So couple things that I want to point out here is that I'm going to presume that my mouse is able to be seen. Perhaps it's not. But 1 inch up from the bottom of the document is a set of markup where it says content greater than topics, which is obviously a path through some links in an application. And in standard DITA, that would be a menu cascade with UI control items in it. Well, that's a specialization of a domain of vocabulary that not everyone would necessarily share in, and so it is not in the very lightest characterization of lightweight DITA. So I had to fall back to just basic phrase elements, similar to span elements in HTML, to represent the scope of the markup that would otherwise be there if we had that domain represented semantically. So that's an example of a constraint that was created, and because this topic was software-oriented, I had to be inventive in supporting the markup for that constraint. I could have simply left the markup off entirely and probably would have been fine. Someone who's creating content, if they are creating software content, then you can introduce a software domain and they would have that menu cascade available to them. But if they're not creating that type of content, this may well have been a discussion about the sequence of buttons to press and starting a tracker. And so the same markup may not have been used for that. Another example of a quirk of the definition is that you'll notice that the list items all have a paragraph tag as the first container of content within them. And that's a necessary aspect of the architecture for specialization, which depends on being able to reuse existing definitions of markup as prototypes for new specializations. I'm not going to get specifically into that because it's being developed still, and there will be future discussions as the committee starts to get that process documented and get some tools out there for folks to be able to use more widely. But this is what it looks like under the covers. And when you put it to use, then it becomes even more exciting. Here is an example of a website that, if you were a writer, you may have seen it, or you may want to see it now that you see this screenshot of it. It's called Write the Docs, and it's the result of an effort of a number of people to make it very easy for software developers using Python-based tools to create websites and aggregations of content. The aggregation of content is seen on the table of contents on the left, which is exactly mimicking a DITA map or relationship of either predefined or query-based content. The links, for example, would be based on a query that retrieved a list of items related by some category, whereas the table of contents represents perhaps a purposeful creation of the sequence and hierarchy of content for a deeper introspection of some theme. On the right-hand side, you see the topic itself, which has no particularly outstanding semantic features in it. The note that you see up at the top is part of Lightweight DITA. The heading is part of it. The block of content beneath the note is part of Lightweight DITA. Basically, everything that we see here could be done in Lightweight DITA. And having done so would enable the content owner whose publishing engine sits on top of their DITA database to be using that content directly and author it directly and see the updates displayed immediately without an intervening build. It's one of the very interesting and exciting prospects on the horizon for Lightweight DITA. I'll show you another site that's also topic-based. This one is called webpages. I ran into it a couple years ago and realized that this is also an example of content that's written not necessarily as a extended guide to the operation of some complex piece of machinery, but basically short nuggets of information that stand alone and may be grouped in categories. And so where it says popular topics in dark on the left, and then you see the gray categories, these are all things that have been pulled together based on usage statistics by the publishing system and surfaced as key links. And if you click on any one of these, then you'll get a list of related topics within that category. And we see two of them here. One of them, here I've taken clicked on the all technology topics, and I have a listing of dozens of topics. I showed only two, the Beginner's Guide to Exploring Content and the iPhone Unlock. Each of these could be a perfectly good singleton DITA topic. It may or may not be done with the map to create the content altogether. If you create it as a single topic, then it actually fulfills the role of what Mark Baker calls the every page is page one methodology. And that's perfectly doable with DITA. And so there's nothing restrictive in the use of DITA for this kind of content. The semantic capabilities in it add a little extra opportunity for making the information more discoverable as well. So if that wetted your whistle, then you may be now asking, how can I use it? So in terms of processing, there's a tool out there that is already able to handle it, and that's the so-called DITA Open Toolkit. If you join the subcommittee or join the mailing list, then we can guide you quickly to where these resources are available and help you get started. And as well, there are other open source projects in progress. I have one that I'm calling Expedita, and I'm actually serving lightweight DITA content on that in a private application that I've got, and we'll plan to make that open. And I know of 2 or 3 other projects that are also creating processors, their own processors. And again, because there are so few tags in lightweight DITA, it's very easy, far easier to create a end-to-end tooling system based on lightweight DITA than if you had to swallow the whole full promise of full DITA. On the authoring side, there's some progress being made there too. Doug Gorman of SimplyXML has worked with Michael Priestley in resolving some differences between the tool that he's presently got and the design of lightweight DITA. And he's told me that he's fully committed to implementing lightweight DITA. So I have put them down as an example of a vendor who's seeing the opportunity and has already made that public commitment. And I know of other editor vendors, they're actually on the subcommittee, that are watching the progress and looking for the opportunity as well. A big if on this is that a project like this can succeed if only if the ecosystem of users and of vendors and consultants equals a happy family with enough work for everyone to be able to make some money off of. Call it capitalistic. There's a great deal to be had by having enough popularity in a standard that it actually generates best-of-breed competition among offered products, which helps to increase the capability of them and helps to make the cost more competitive for users shopping for solutions. So the big if is we hope that this is able to take off in a big way and float everyone's boats in a productive level. However, this Jenga stack is a good symbol of where we are with the standard right now. If you step into experimenting with lightweight DITA, be prepared to adapt with it as it changes along the way. Some things that are likely to be impacted if the committee makes some changes to the design that you may have implemented either in your content or in your tools might be the doc types. And I mentioned that the little LW is the only thing that separates the current profile from the standard DITA profile. There could be other changes to the doc types as well, and so that might be something that's easily enough dealt with simply with a tool that can do global search and replace, for example. However, if the changes involve changes to the content models or to element names, then you may need to write XSLT transforms based on the identity transform that modify the content from the old form to the new form. That's a fairly straightforward capability, and certainly it doesn't mean that anything is broken for good if you go down this road and then one day the committee changes their mind on a particular design feature. There are usually ways to get back out and get back to safe ground again. Specializations are all experimental at the moment, and so anything that's done today that you may try, a different methodology may come out in a couple of months' time. So I just point that out as being an area that could be changeable as the committee's work progresses. And with that would be any output transforms that depend on a particular market that may have changed in any of the above design changes for the content. And so now we get a chance to look ahead and try to imagine what we could do if we just had the power. I've mentioned simplified specialization. That's going to be based, as I said, on existing components that you can put together in new ways to represent new schemas of use. It will not use the standard DITA design pattern for specialization for several reasons. Probably the most impactful one for the type of work that I'm doing for web-based publishing is that the standard DITA schemas are numerous, and when you're processing content on the web, you want to reduce the number of files that are being handled in web transactions to as few as possible. And so the simplified specialization reduces the number of files that have to be used to represent a design pattern for new specialization. So I'm very, very much looking forward to how this will pan out and hopefully reducing the amount of time spent reading and loading definitions that may not even be used but are required by the former technique of specialization. Another opportunity is what we're calling specialization by template, which is observing that when you create a template for a writer to follow, it already represents an implicit schema. Everything that you can do within the schema could be represented, everything you could do within a template could be represented by a schema whose complexity is no more complex than the template that it validates. And I'm using some careful language here. If you were an XML person, hopefully you followed that. What this means is that a document can set up its own schema for ensuring that future samples of content based on that template will all conform to the schema, the implicit schema in that template. It has some interesting challenges, and that's how do you take care of things like single or multiple occurrences, or more complex content models that may not be represented in that template. But we'll see where we get with this, because it looks like a very promising way of offering someone who's, say, a website developer, an easy way to put things together by example, and voila, produce a functioning system that guides their writers in creating that same kind of content continuously, time after time. I've mentioned direct content for the web, and that's not the end of it. I'm hoping that as you've been thinking about and listening to the opportunities here, that you're already thinking of new ways that you might want to apply using lightweight DITA in ways that the subcommittee may not even have thought of yet. And so to that end, I encourage you to get in touch with Michael Priestley, myself, or any of the members on the subcommittee. As you see us in our public mailings, respond to them if you wish. And we would gladly love to have these very, very interesting conversations with you. We think we're on the cusp of actually some new breakthroughs in both communities that are reached by DITA and the kinds of tools that can be developed for dealing with content that go beyond the traditional content development tools that we've dealt with. And so I close with this question: what will you do with lightweight DITA? Again, think of it, talk to us, let us know. I would love to hear your questions, and in fact, this becomes the proverbial period at the end of the sentence, Adam, and I will turn it over to you to handle Q&A.
Great. Well, thank you, Don, for a very informative webinar. The first question has come in is, will industry standard DITA editors adopt lightweight DITA when available?
Absolutely. I mentioned that lightweight DITA is based on as a proper subset of standard DITA. As soon as we can get well, in fact, if you pull down the schema, the DTDs, we're doing our development work with DTDs because they are just so agile compared to other tools. And then as it comes time to making them standard, we'll talk about how to define the design pattern in RelaxNG or other grammar. But those DTDs will set up your standard XML tool for creating content that follows that DTD, and absolutely no problem with it. Any customizations that you want to do as far as CSS for styling that content, or any editor labeling that you want to do through the editor, will of course have to be redone if the DTD changes. But if you use it in the straight XML mode, it will absolutely work with it.
Thank you, Don. The second question has come in is, how many people are on the design subcommittee, and what industries are they from?
It's actually a fairly large roster. Not everyone comes in to each bi-weekly meeting, but the roster has 36 members on it right now, and the makeup is fairly similar to the DITA TC itself, so that they represent academia. We saw a couple of requirements from someone who was obviously in academia. So their interest is in vocational material and for creating assignments on information design and architectures or user experience. And they're using or planning to use lightweight DITA for scaffolding for their research activities. It would make an excellent journal layout, for example, a structured type for journal articles. Another aspect would be the editor and CMS vendors that I mentioned are part of the technical committee, and they're on the committee hoping to see what the opportunity is for seeding future upsale usages of the editors that they bring out for lightweight DITA. A number of consultants like myself are on the committee, and we're looking to find ways to create lighter weight solutions for many people and companies that are trying to roll DITA out but don't have the experience with the deeper level of tooling that's typically used in TechCom organizations, for example. Marketing people in a company are looking for ways to create microsite content and white paper collaboration with SMEs, and so they're represented on the committee, and I'm very excited by that because I think that they have a set of tools. If you think about every website, every business website that you go to, the content on every one of those websites is probably done by a different set of internally developed web publishing tools. They may use a standard HTML database under the covers, but many times the tools that they have created for the kind of responsive, adaptive behaviors that they have at their site are very independent, very siloed compared to what other people are using. I think that lightweight DITA has the opportunity of making it possible for common tools to actually be used across many different web service providers and be able to make it finally possible for one website to interchange content with another, something that's very nearly impossible today without a great deal of content rework. And then finally, we've got members of companies that are hoping to help in this next generation research meet their requirements for information. So it's a very interesting group. People of many different denominations and interests coming together to see this happen.
Thank you, Don. The next question has come in is, are there plans to making the styling settings for the plugins more lightweight? That, to me, is the biggest barrier to DITA adoption.
And that's a very good question. I hinted on it on the question about using DITA in a standard editor. Anytime you add a new document type definition to an editor, you may need to customize the editor to represent your authoring requirements for it. Sometimes it's as simple as a style setting to make the content show in a way that is more pleasing in your eyes. Sometimes it's actual behaviors in the editor itself. One that I find very useful is recording a macro of keystrokes so that I can just press a button and watch that sequence of keystrokes repeated at a single press of a button instead of my having to do them multiple times. But obviously, if you set something like that up for a particular editor and then change editors or change workflows, then that saved macro may not work the same way again. So the whole area of styling, I wish it could make things easier, and it will because there will be fewer elements to deal with. But ultimately, the usability of these systems is up to the tool vendors in making it so that all the effort you put into styling a particular view is not wasted if you move from one workflow or one process to another. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you, Don. The next question has come in is, most folks would want many of the domain, I'm sorry, I read it too early. Any thoughts of making the vocabulary domains easier for a less technical person to restrict? Most folks would want many of the domains, learning, programming, hazards, machine industry, either on or off.
Good question. Were you finished, Adam?
Yes.
Okay, so that's definitely part of the design work that's going into how specializations are indicated by reusing chunks that already work. The current specializations that if you try to apply a constraint, you end up creating many files of constraint modules, and ultimately all of those files are read in, in order to come up with a lighter weight application, but you still had to basically handle nearly everything in the original DTDs. The method in lightweight DITA should make that much easier by requiring only the component definitions that are actually used to be used as part of defining the specialization. I'm leaving this up to Michael Priestley to document better than it has been so far. There's a little bit of dark art in here right now. I play with the DTDs. I don't do the specialization design. But if we are successful at making it simpler, part of it will have been the introduction of a methodology that uses component bricklaying, as it were, to create a course of design rather than the current notching things out by using constraints.
Thank you, Don. The next question that's come in is, you mentioned fewer tags. How does lightweight DITA compare with HTML or regular DITA?
So currently, lightweight DITA has about a third of the tag size. When there's no domains in it, has about a third of the tag size of either regular DITA or HTML. There was a time when HTML had only about 200 elements in it, and when DITA was first introduced, it had a little over 110 basic elements in it. As all of these standards have evolved, they've accreted more markup in them. And it's partly this happens when you're creating a solution that's to be used by the greatest number of people, because some will have requirements that others don't, but everyone's requirements will need to be represented in the standard solution. Think of today's DITA as a cookbook that can be used in a piecemeal fashion by the appropriate selection of domains and then the use of constraints to notch out parts of that architecture that you don't need. However, it's a great deal of effort to set that up. The nature of lightweight DITA is that it starts out small and then you add to it only the things that you need. So it's a different nature of how the number of elements are actually added to an application in order to come up with what you really need to drive your business requirements. But again, basic lightweight DITA is about the third the size of today's DITA 1.2.
Great, thank you, Don. The last question that's come in is, what is the most outrageous use case you've thought about for lightweight DITA? How would you get them up and running with a solution?
I like that. I'd have. I'm already running a collaboration project for a book publisher. Richard Hamilton of XML Press produces a series called The Language Of, and 2 years ago I participated in working on a wiki to create the language of content strategy. He's now working on the language of technical communication and the language of business storytelling. And I've developed an application for him in which the specialization is nearly fully conformant with the principles of lightweight DITA. I had to do this before the architecture was settled on lightweight DITA, and I probably will switch it to lightweight DITA in the near term until things settle down, because I have real business requirements running on it right now. But it's so conformant that I actually proffered the specialization to Michael to use as an example for testing out this specialization by template. And that's what the committee is working through right now. And the outcome of that should be a well-documented methodology for using templates in the future to set up repeatable authoring and processing pipelines based on a template rather than a schema. So that's one that I've done. But when I think of outrageous, what I use as an example is think of your neighborhood association newsletter, and you typically receive it as a printed PDF mailing in once a month or however often they do updates, and they have that same content on the website. But I can only imagine how much effort it's taken someone to do this multiple production of content that could have been done with a simple structured authoring system. So when I talk about new communities of use, how neat would it be if every neighborhood association could use a lightweight DITA-based application for their websites and their mailings? It may be extreme, but I think we have to think in that fashion to understand where some of the new market opportunities might be for lightweight DITA. What can we do that upsets the establishment? And the establishment here being every obdurate methodology that people have today of putting content together and getting it out to their constituency. Lightweight DITA should be able to solve some of those problems, and I hope we can have that discussion with others. That's my outrageous example.
Great. Well, thank you, Don, and thank everyone for attending. This will conclude today's broadcast. You'll be able to access the recorded version of this webinar in the archive section of our website located at www.dclab.com. Our next webinar is scheduled for Tuesday, November 3rd at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, titled Enterprise Firefighting Translation Issues. Optimize the process with compressive metrics, being presented by Scott Carruthers, Globalization Executive at the Technology Agency. Thank you everyone for attending and have a great day.